podcast. My name's Cam. So this one I'm going to kind of be covering over a lot of the news and stuff that came out over the past week in terms of like wrestling TV shows and just wrestling news in general. One of the things I did want to touch on is this would be the 14th anniversary of the Benoit tragedy. There is people that they mainly focus on what happened on that night, which I can understand. That was definitely a tragedy in every sense of the word. However, I don't stick to just regarding Benoit because of that. Reason being, Benoit, I've been a viewer of his, if you will, since I want to say 97, 98, right around there, which I would have been a kid at that time. And he's the most memorable part of what I can recall from the 90s version of the Horseman that had Ric Flair, Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, unfortunately Mongo McMichael, and Arn Anderson. He's one of the people I did think was a fit for it, as well as and then I followed him when he was part of, I think they were called the Revolution with Shane Douglas, and subsequently the Radicals and WWE and WWE Championship and things like that. And that was such a big deal because no one his size was really a champion at that time. Vince was pretty much more for those big guys. And the fact that he was able to obtain that was a big deal. And then you factor in the fact that Eddie Guerrero also won. And then you factor in that a lot of people that are in the business today, they were inspired by Benoit's performance. And then you get into this whole thing with Dark Side of the Ring and whatnot, and you have to kind of like look at it to where it's weird that there's a divide. Because I would say up until before Guerrero's death, I think there was one version of Benoit. Then after Guerrero's death, there was a completely different version of Benoit. And we all know tragedies and stuff like that do change people. And that's just how it happens. People adapt based onto the circumstances that they are placed into. And I think Benoit had a lot of things going against him. I do think CTE did play a role into it because it's been proven from... there's a linebacker, and I'm blanking on his name. He used to play for the Chargers, who became a completely different person because CTE. And then I think that played in a factor. I also think the loss and depression also played a factor because of what happened with Guerrero. I've had controversial takes with Benoit, and I have realized based on what I'm seeing on wrestling social media, I'm probably an outlier. But I think for the performance side of it, it's definitely Hall of Fame worthy. I don't think WWE should necessarily erase it. I can understand not wanting to glorify Benoit's history, and I can get that. But for people like me that grew up with it, I might not remember everything about his career, but maybe I want to see Benoit versus Malenko, or Benoit versus several people. John Cena, I think he was one of the people that he had put on a good match with. Or want to see the triple threat match with him and Jericho tag teaming. Things like that. I'm not a big fan of erasing the history because, yes, what he did was terrible. And there's no taking away from that. But being able to see his performance is a completely different standard. And if you want to factor into WWE, like maybe wanting to erase him, Snuka was essentially a highly, I don't want to say high suspect, but basically he was a major suspect in a murder that took place. And he is still able to be searched and not erased. And if he was found guilty, which I believe he did after his death, I think he was found guilty of that. You'd think that WWE would basically treat it the same, but they haven't. But that's what it is. I did want to talk a little bit about Benoit, and I have considered, because Justin Credible was friends with him during the time, and they actually trained together at Stu Hart's Heart Dungeon, and I thought about getting him on just to talk about Benoit and what he knew about him prior to that, and his performances and things like that. And ultimately I decided against it because I didn't want to do a Benoit only episode at this point, but it was something that was considered. And maybe next time I talk with Justin Credible, we'll talk more in detail about Benoit if we jump around from a couple different aspects of behind the scenes wrestling. But I do know for a fact that you can find that in one of our older episodes. I think it was actually the first interview you mentioned talking about working with Benoit and Jericho and Lance Storm. But that's what we got. And in terms of TV, I'm going to kind of lump in WWE altogether. Just given how the TV's been, it has been great. I would say Riddle and McIntyre put on a good match from Raw on the 21st, but that's mainly the big thing that stuck out to me. Let me rephrase. There is actually something else that stuck out to me. What the hell is WWE doing with Nikki Cross? The rumor is that Nikki Cross had to change her character because they want to call her something else based on Karrion Kross being called up. If that's the case, that's insane. And it doesn't make sense because you can. Well, I'm actually going to use AEW as an example. We have Brian Cage and Christian Cage there. People do know that those are two different people. People are not going to associate that Nikki Cross and Karrion Kross are together. The names aren't even spelled the same. Plus, you have Karrion Kross being managed by Scarlett Bordeaux. I think it's Bordeaux. Pretty sure that's how you say her last name. So there's not that in there. Now she's pretending to be a superhero, which it did work with a hurricane, but this is completely different. Like, it doesn't seem like they're trying to sell the fact that they believe they're a superhero and things like that. It's just, it's hard because it does not feel the same. And then now, because this past, I'm recording this late Monday night, they had mentioned that it's now Nikki Ash, which is almost a superhero. What is that? That doesn't make any sense. But WWE does WWE things, and Raw is not great. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just not great. And I really, really wish that they would kind of get themselves together with it. I will say the main event was really good as well, with Bobby Lashley versus Xavier Woods. Xavier, in my opinion, is probably up there as one of the better performers that WWE has, and I think he's always been kind of an underdog and underrated in terms of WWE. I wanted him to do stuff on his own for a while now, and I think actually when Big E broke out on his own, I was an advocate for Xavier to do something in his singles run. I don't know if I would necessarily put the world title or WWE title on him or Universal title. If anything, maybe like Intercontinental. I actually think he would be a really good Intercontinental champion. Because the guy can work in the ring, well in the ring. And that's one of the things with the New Day between Xavier, Kofi, and Big E. I think they're all great talent on their own. I don't think they're going to do much beyond that with them, but that's I think they're great talent on their own. So over on NXT, you had a tag team match between Oney Lorcan, Pete Dunne, Austin Theory, and Johnny Gargano. That was a great match. When WWE can do tag team and not kind of like randomly glue them together and then break them up, they can actually do tag team pretty well. Example of that is Theory and Gargano, Oney Lorcan and Dunne. I actually do think RK Bro, which is Orton and Riddle, is actually a fairly decent tag team. They complement each other. You have the New Day, the Wyatt family, the Shield in the back in the day. They can do tag teams if they wanted to. For some reason or another, they're very fond of breaking them up. Sometimes when it's unnecessary. Because like what I try to equate it to is you can keep tag teams together and they can still pursue singles runs, but if there is a reason in the story you want to split them up, like maybe I'll use who's a good example? I would use the Rockers as an example where Shawn needed to be propelled a little bit further. I can see breaking him up in that circumstances, but my opinion, New Day doesn't need to be broken up. Wyatt family did not need to be broken up. There's been others that I'm just not thinking of, but WWE is a big fan of breaking up the tag teams. There was Kyle O'Reilly versus Kushida was a really good one as well. Kyle O'Reilly is showing to be a star coming out of Undisputed Era. I think it's kind of hard to say what kind of character he has, but I do think Cole and O'Reilly are definitely shown to be the stars coming out of that group. But yeah, that's where it's at. I think those were like the two highlights from NXT in my opinion. Going on to SmackDown, the mixed tag match. Well, I'm pretty sure they called it mixed tag. I don't think they called it intergender. Was Bayley and Seth versus Bianca and Cesaro. Based on the names I just read off, if you've been paying attention to any WWE lately, you know that that's going to be a banger match. Seth and Cesaro are really great performers for the men's side. Bayley and Bianca are probably their top tier women's on SmackDown. You also had Jimmy Uso versus Dolph Ziggler, and he kind of is aligning himself with Roman now. I'm having a hard time reading that. I don't think it's going to be forever. It kind of feels like Jimmy's faking it, character-wise. Faking it to ultimately turn on Roman later. Is that going to happen? I don't know. But that's my feeling on it. It doesn't feel real. No, I shouldn't even say that. It doesn't feel like it's being sold as being real. Like, the only way I can explain it is like if you watch wrestling or if you watch any kind of movies, when someone's very awkward and trying to fake and pretend that they're not really into it, and like they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna definitely take care of her, we're definitely gonna do this, and things like that. That's what it's coming across as. It doesn't come across as like the character believes in what they're doing. Singles match, you get Big E versus Apollo Crews. It was a decent match. I didn't like the ending to it. And me personally, I do not dig Apollo Crews' character. I get it. It seems to be working as a heel. It's kind of getting over as a heel. I'm just not a fan of the character. I do think they're going to go through a character change after this run is over, because I don't think they're going to stick with this being like he's an African. I forgot what he referred to himself as, but I don't think it's going to stick. I think it's going to be like a Kofi Kingston Jamaican thing, where once it has its run, it's just going to have its run and be done and over with and barely talked about thereafter. Which Kofi kind of, if I remember correctly, based on the thing I watched, he did create the character himself. He knew he needed something like that to get into WWE. But thankfully, they didn't stick with it and then make him like play it out to where it would have hurt him in the end. Because a lot of times with characters like that, they have to stick with it for so long that it kind of takes away from their ability to be able to move to the next level and maybe obtain a world championship, which at this point he has obtained. He won it from Daniel Bryan, but as his Jamaican character, I kind of don't see that happening. The other thing that we had go on is with AEW. Now, with AEW Dynamite, this was on Saturday. I think this was, if I remember right, this wasn't live. This was pre-recorded, because if you look at the sky, it's light out, and this aired at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. I live in Florida. It's gonna be dark by 8:30, so I'm pretty sure this was pre-recorded. I don't remember if they stated it was pre-recorded or if it was live, but yeah, definitely pre-recorded. First off, we have Powerhouse Hobbs versus Adam Page. Adam Page is definitely going to be built up to be the next champion. He's probably going to be the guy that dethrones Kenny Omega, to be honest, for AEW, which has been a long-standing build. And between how they've got it working with the Dark Order, you know he's going to be a phase. Speaking on the Dark Order, I was a big fan of Brody Lee. I like what he brought to it. I do think that the Dark Order is going to be a face group, and it's kind of hard to understand what the Dark Order is now. Before, it kind of felt like a cult, which honestly I think it was his best formation of it. Now I'm not sure what they're trying to do with it. I'm not saying that they